Welcome, viewers, to Bodhi Unified Flow. Here we simplify complexity and amplify performance. Today, we're jumping right into part 3 of the buy, hold, and sell blueprint: equity, mutual funds, REITs, and gold ETFs. And we are tackling what is, let's be totally honest, the absolute hardest part of investing: exactly when to sell equity by breaking the attributes. We spent so much time figuring out what to buy, analyzing market trends, looking at charts. But the second the market dips or our portfolio starts bleeding, we freeze. Well, today, we're going to fix that. We're going to build a rigorous, institutional-grade divestment strategy together.
Here is the structural roadmap for our explainer today. We'll quickly set our objectives, dive into the psychology of selling, break down the actual framework, look at quantitative attribute fractures, implement a systematic sell discipline, and finally, wrap things up with a summary and our references. All right, Section 1, Blueprint Agenda and Objectives. Let's establish exactly what we're aiming for here. By the end of this explainer, you are going to be able to shift completely away from emotional reactivity. Instead, you'll have a highly disciplined, highly objective framework for selling assets. We want to stop making those gut reaction decisions based on fear, or even worse, false hope, and start making them based on hard, structural data. Moving on to Section 2, the psychology of selling. Before we can build a systematic blueprint, we have to confront the psychological friction that stops us from acting rationally. Behavioral finance research points out a massive flaw in human wiring. It's called loss aversion. Basically, we experience the psychological pain of a financial loss with roughly twice the intensity of an equivalent gain. Think about that. This cognitive asymmetry is literally an invisible chain holding your portfolio back. It's exactly what leads you to hold on to a falling knife, just blindly hoping the price recovers. So every market participant faces a crucial crossroad right here. On one side, you have the amateur approach, which is emotional selling. This gets triggered by arbitrary price drops, outright panic, or just holding on to trapped capital. On the other side is the professional approach, systematic selling. This is rules-based, it's institutional grade, and it tracks the permanent degradation of a business's fundamentals. Your success doesn't rely on how intensely you watch the market. It relies on structurally neutralizing those emotional vulnerabilities. Which brings us to Section 3, breaking the attributes framework. To eliminate emotion, institutional asset allocators use a rigorous methodology known as breaking the attributes. But what are these attributes? Investable grade attributes are the core fundamental qualities of a business. We're talking about real business strength, exceptional management quality, and attractive valuations. Listen, your initial purchase should never happen just because a stock price suddenly dropped 15%. You buy an asset because it successfully passes the extreme rigor of these specific investable grade attributes. Now here is the crucial takeaway. We do not sell just because the market gets a little volatile. A company can maintain its winning attributes for years, totally regardless of broader market panic. So as long as those core attributes remain solid, wealth is naturally created over time. We hold. Price fluctuations alone absolutely do not and should not dictate the sell. But obviously, things change. What happens when those attributes start to crumble? This brings us to a concept called the broken thesis. This is the exact point where the fundamental assumptions that underpinned your initial investment decision prove to be wrong. And to be clear, we are not talking about a temporary quarterly hiccup. We are talking about the structural and permanent degradation of those core attributes. When this structural degradation happens, your investment thesis is officially broken. At that point, liquidating or reallocating that capital is the only logical step left.
Let's look at Section 4, Quantitative Attribute Fractures.
You know the old saying, you cannot manage what you do not measure. Well, a truly systematic sell discipline relies on continuously tracking quantitative key performance indicators. When financial attributes cross specific, pre-calculated thresholds over consecutive periods, it's a massive red flag. It signals a fundamental shift in the company's long-term economic model. We need hard numbers here, not just qualitative theories. So let's walk through the exact step-by-step algorithm for selling. This is the quantitative attribute fracture flowchart. Step 1. Check the quarterly earnings release. Simple enough. Step 2. Ask yourself, is the quarterly earnings per share growth less than 20%? If no, the asset is fine. You hold. But if yes, you don't panic sell right away. Instead, you carefully track the subsequent quarter. That's Step 3. Finally, Step 4. If a second consecutive deceleration is seen, the thesis is fundamentally broken. You confirm the fracture and you sell. This 4-step process completely removes the guesswork.
A single bad quarter warrants observation, sure, but consecutive deceleration, that confirms an attribute fracture. All right, moving into Section 5, Systematic Sell Discipline.
So how do we apply this broadly across our entire portfolio? Divestment must always be a rules-based process, but the rules adapt depending on the asset. For equities and core assets, the trigger is exactly what we just discussed, the permanent degradation of investable grade attributes. The required action there is to liquidate immediately to defend your gross margins. Now, for goal-oriented investments, like mutual funds tied to retirement or maybe a child's education, the trigger is totally different. It's simply the approach of a fixed timeline milestone. As that target date nears, you systematically transition that capital out of volatile equity instruments and into low volatility capital preservation instruments.
To actually implement this discipline in real life, you need strict operational habits. First, execute your transactions systematically over time. Don't do it all at once. Second, buy on a scale down and sell on a scale up. This is a brilliant technique because it naturally neutralizes timing risk and actually lets you take advantage of market volatility. Next, utilize automated exit rules based purely on those objective threshold breaches we just outlined. Take the human element out of it entirely. By continuously pruning low-return capital and automating your exits, you guarantee your portfolio stays highly optimized and actively defends its margins.
Section 6. Let's do a quick summary and check our references.
Let's recap the critical blueprint protocols we established today. Above all else, selling must be a systematic, rules-based process, never an emotional reaction. You have to recognize the psychological trap of loss aversion and actively defeat it so you stop holding on to falling knives. Remember, a sell is only triggered by the structural, permanent degradation of your initial investable grade attributes. And finally, utilize tools like the quantitative fracture flowchart to mathematically confirm when an investment thesis is broken. We want to stop bleeding capital on broken theses for good.
Everything we've discussed today is grounded in rigorous institutional practice. The key references for this explainer include the Buy, Hold, and Sell Blueprint Core Framework, Zerota Varsity's modules on fundamental analysis, and exit strategies from VectorVest and Ticker. I highly recommend diving into these materials for your further study.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. Open up your portfolio today, look at your holdings, and ask yourself honestly, are you holding on to any falling knives right now simply because you are mathematically afraid to realize the loss? Evaluate your current assets against this precise blueprint today. It's time to cut the emotional noise, execute with discipline, and take back control. Thank you for joining me, and remember to join us next time as we continue to simplify complexity and amplify your performance.